Welcome to the Post Shift Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. What is happening, Post Shifters? Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. I got one really unique, crazy one today, which I'm really looking forward to. Instagram is still not working for me for some reason. I got to look into this. Why is it not working for me this time around? Hasn't worked for the last couple of streams. So if you do follow me on Instagram, I apologize for not being able to go live on that. But man, today I've got Jean-Marc from Imbiblia. Oh, there we go. Instagram is working now. There we go. Look at that. So I've got Jean-Marc from Imbiblia. We're going to walk through the Imbiblia bartending app and get the lowdown on where it came from, how it came to be, and what you should be doing with it. And so welcome, Jean-Marc. How are you?
I'm great. It's awesome to be here. Thank you so much.
We've been talking
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. We've been talking for a number of years. And I remember, I think it was during the pandemic, you hit me up and was like, hey man, like I got this idea for the app. Like, what do you think? And I'm sure you were pitching this and like farming it out to a few people, saying what their opinions were going to be. But it was all about the early stages of Imbiblia. So what was your origin story, your driving force to sort of, where'd you come from to launching Imbiblia?
Yeah, sure. So I was, a bartender for a decade plus. I helped open up, a fancy restaurant in Boston. Then I worked at the Four Seasons in Vancouver while that was still open. That's where I met Justin Taylor, who hooked me up with you. Shout out to my boy Justin Taylor. And then I followed him to Cascade on Main Street and was there for a few years. So kind of did the rounds. And as in terms of the app, one of the things that I guess its origin story was, when it's 12:59 or 1:40 and your last call, and suddenly you get are we allowed to swear on this? Is this family?
You can swear. It's not family friendly at all.
When you're fucking getting buried and like shits are just like popping up galore. But you're in the flow. You're just like dancing, and it's like you're having a great time. But then a recipe comes up, and you haven't made it in like 7 months, and you remember like 90% of it, and you're like, I remember it's Fernet, but like how much? Or it's the opposite. It's like, I know there's like a quarter ounce of this, but like what? I know it's dark. What is it? And then it breaks your entire flow. You have to stop everything. You usually have to turn around. You have to open up a cabinet. You have to pull out the infamous, infernal, drive me batshit crazy sticky binder. And then you spend like, you look like an idiot because like everything's still going crazy. The waiters and waitresses are, staring at you like, what are you doing? And you're flipping through this godforsaken tome from hell. And then you have to scan a block of text just to find that one piece of information that you're missing. And I'm a very slow reader on top of it. So it drove me absolutely nuts because it wasn't just a stutter in the work. It was like, hold on, let me trip on my face, eat shit, knock a few teeth out, and glue them back in. Oh, I'll get back to working and making drinks now. So that was like incredibly infuriating to me. And what I knew is that, reading is pretty slow, even for the fastest readers, when you compare it to how well the visual system can filter and comprehend other things. Like, best example I can think of is driving a car. If you had to, let's imagine that in order to drive a car, you had to read a block of text about what was in front of that car. Like, no one would ever get anywhere because you'd constantly be scanning for like girl running after her ball kind of thing, or like crazy cyclist making a weird turn or something. It doesn't work. But our visual system just filters out most of what we're seeing while we're driving, and we only pay attention to those high like urgent things. Like if a ball does start bouncing out into the road, you instantly pick up on that, whereas you're ignoring like all 150 pedestrians on the sidewalk that you're just like cruising by. And so my theory, my hypothesis with Imbiblia was really like, what if we could take a cocktail recipe and disaggregate it, take it away from text, and translate as much of it as possible into a visual format? And then when you're in that situation where you're getting slammed and you need to check just one little detail, I made it with Imbiblia, so it's like 3 taps, maybe a little bit of a scroll, and it's there. And it's only 2 taps if you've already got your app open during work. And then you can basically filter out all of the information, because the glassware is in one section, the methods is in another, the garnish is in another, and then the central part of it allows you to pick out which ingredient you need ASAP, because the ratio chart is color coded, and then all of the ingredients have color dot, and obviously we'll show that in a bit. But your ability to just check something extremely quickly and waste as little time as possible is just incredible with Imbiblia compared to that cursed sticky binder.
So how'd you make that jump? How'd you make that leap between a bartender at 12:45 getting a sticky binder out and going, because there is some steps and there is a lot of logistics involved from like concept in my brain, want to get it out there, to actually like even getting the first step started on creating an app?
Yeah, there's a quote that I found from someone on Twitter that I really like, which is something to the effect of, our the our underestimation of how long something will take and how big of an endeavor it is allows us to bite off way more than we can chew. And then once we get into that process, and there's that sunk cost fallacy of like, well, I've come this far, I might as well just keep going, which is to say that like it took a lot longer than I imagined, because I was just starting to like get curious about coding, and then I basically taught myself how to code pre-AI.
So you coded all this yourself?
Yes. Basically, Imbiblia all the way up to Imbiblia 2.0 is like 97% just coded the old school way. And then once GPT was good enough to actually start helping, because it's a huge application, even though it looks pretty simple. There's this vibe coding thing these days, which can do like basically the fidget spinner or fidget toy equivalent of an app. It can do that really well. But if you want something like large and complex, you really have to understand software architecture in order to get the AI to do all of these tiny little things correctly. So yeah, the Imbiblia as it stands today is almost all like human built, which I'm proud of. But now AI allows me to move development even faster, since I know what I'm doing and I can focus AI on that too. So when someone wants a feature, a new feature that makes a lot of sense, I can build that way faster than I could before.
So with all the cocktail apps are out there, because there is a lot of cocktail apps out in the market. Mm-hmm. What did you set about, or what did you see the hole that you had over, say, anything else that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest sort of signifier for me here was, in over a decade plus of working behind the bar, I never once had another bartender be like, yo, this cocktail app, you should check it out. Which I think that for me, that says everything. That means that a cocktail app for bartenders has not been, nailed. And that's what I sought out to do. And I'm very proud of the fact that bartenders recommend Imbiblia to bartenders. Like that was my only goal, which was to make a tool that can make all bartenders' lives easier and better. And actually, a cool little story here, which I have to throw in, is right before I got the second business account signed, the manager who was really for it. But she had to convince her like superior, and they went out for drinks, and she ordered something, and the bartender didn't know what it was. And guess what happened?
She pulled the Imbiblia app.
No. The bartender who didn't know it pulled out Imbiblia and checked it. And she was like, look, and her superior sitting right next to her was like, all right, damn, I'm sold.
That's cool. That's very,
Yeah.
very cool. And I suppose it is a good point. Like, as bartenders, I think we're tactile people. So it's like you always get, oh, you got to read this cocktail book. You got to read Death and Company. You got to read Jeffrey Morgenthau, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Dale DeGroff. But like, or you got to read this article on liquor.com. But then when you do talk about apps, it's really interesting that people are like, oh, well, no one's actually talking about apps on apps. And that
Yeah.
bartenders suggesting apps. So let's or actually one more question before we dive in, because it's one more question. Did you design this for day one bartenders, seasoned pros? How do you develop and design the app around the multitude of different sort of layers and levels of bartending there are out there? Because there are people who are hardcore niche cocktail bartenders like yourself and myself. Then you've got day one bartenders who might just be like, I want to get into cocktails, but I'm working at a dive bar in Cincinnati. How do
Mhm.
you develop it so that it sort of crosses all knowledge bases?
That's that's an awesome question because it's um it's a really deep problem in terms of like what features do you design something to have, and this is really a question that like applies to a lot of things, not just in Biblia, not just like apps across the board, but like how do you create something that's approachable for the beginner but also incredibly comprehensive for the expert? That is something that I quite literally spent years thinking about while I was designing this and thinking about it. And that's, so in Biblia, like 1.0 was basically just a library. There was no like builder and accounts and list creation and flavor analysis like there is now. It was just that initial library of like 500. And I wanted that to kind of, test a few ideas here. It was like, do really seasoned bartenders find this interesting
Mm,
and useful? And how do brand new people find this? So I did a lot of, in the field testing where I would go to a bar I've never been to before, and I would pull out in Biblia and I would show them a recipe card that was, maybe one of my custom creations or a friend's custom creation. And I would give them my phone. I was like, hey, do you mind trying this one out? I think you have all the ingredients. And just seeing how fast someone who had never seen the interface and this specific visual format just pick it up like that um, was really validating. And so to try and answer your question, I've really tried to, because I was a beginner. I remember being a bar back at the Landing in Marblehead, and I had a really good but a very hard ass bartender who I was working under, and she put me through the ringer. And I remember, just something as simple as like the bartender turns to you and asks for something, and you have no idea what it is, but it's in the liquor closet somewhere, and then you just like hoof to the liquor cabinet so that you can have as much time as possible just like looking and trying to read. And it's like, she said, what did
Go
she
get me
say?
Pashoa. Go get me Pashoa.
Ex-
What the fuck is
exactly.
Pashoa? Like,
Exactly. So like one of the things in Biblia is like you can click on that ingredient, it brings up an ingredient card, and if it's a bottle, it shows you a picture of that bottle instantly.
nice.
So like as a bar back, I could, run to the liquor store, pull out in Biblia, check that ingredient, and be like, "Oh, it's this one," that kind of thing.
Nice.
And then from, the other end of that is like after 10 years, after reading, all of the great cocktail books, diving into Wondrick, etc. Like, how do you cater to the nth percentile of like nerdy bartender? It's like, well, then it comes down to uh, extreme granular detail. Like,
Hmm.
can I like, for example, in the builder, um, probably the biggest challenge in the last, like once I launched 2.0, the biggest challenge became very evident because most things are in volume, but some things are done with weight,
Yeah.
which is a real problem, because if you want to convert between weight and volume, you need density. And density is not an easy metric to come by when you're talking about something as kind of superfluous or superficial as like an orange peel. It's like, what's the density of an orange peel? You can't Google that and get a straight answer. But I managed to figure out a way that did this incredibly well. And it was very, very difficult, but I made it happen. And now what that allowed me to do is I could then add units of measurement in weight, not just volume. And Imbiblia just does all of the calculations between weight and volume for quite literally every ingredient in the platform so far. There's over 4,000 right now, and more are getting added all the time. So, back to your question, a super nerdy bartender needs to be able to create a recipe that has, dashes of something, that has milliliters of something, that has grams of something. It needs to be incredibly comprehensive when it comes to these specific measurements. And it was, like I said, it was incredibly difficult, but I'm so glad I did it, because once I did that, everything else was possible. Like that, the bar that I mentioned that has 426 recipes on Imbiblia, that was required. Like they had weights for almost all of their custom ingredients, which then get nested into their regular canon of recipes, and it all just works seamless across volume and weight through those secret density values.
The secret density coefficients that are in the back end of Imbiblia.
Exactly. Yeah, that's basically what's happening.
Okay, so let's take a look at. Do you want to share your screen there?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
sure.
bring that up.
Let me just go here.
Yeah, get rid of that one because I'm. Oh.
Window. Oh wait, no, not window. Sorry.
There we go.
Share screen. All right, there we go.
There we go. Work. So we're going to flick that over there. So that is the front end of Imbiblia right there.
Yeah, so what we've got on the right is basically your standard personal account. This is a business account on the left. We'll get into that. When you download the app, it is a free download. That was super important to me. I wanted to be able to offer a lot of value for free. So free downloads, you get the whole public library. You get access to, that was annoying. You get access to, the non-alcoholic list, the ingredient list, and then you also get to see new recipes. So these are all recipes that have been added by users on Imbiblia. It's the latest 50 recipes that have been added. There's actually been obviously a lot more. So yeah, I wanted this to be useful even if a bartender wasn't at the point in their career where they could justify spending a couple of bucks a month in order to have like the full profile and the builder and whatnot. Like if you're a bar back and you're in that situation that we were talking about earlier, I wanted to be able to provide this free resource that is still quite powerful. So just to get a quick view of this visual format that I was talking about, we're looking at an aviation here. And as I said, it disaggregates all of the information and allows you to very quickly zero in on whatever you want. So if you're like, oh, I know there's a little bit of creme de violette in aviation, but I can't remember how much. Like you look at this, boom, you see that purple or violet, and then it matches the dot, and then you look over 0.25 ounces, boom. And you can ignore the glass, the garnish, all of the other ingredients, all the methods. It allows you to cherry pick exactly the information you want based on the situation of information that you need, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so for the business, oh, keep going. Sorry.
If you have a quick question, please shoot for it.
Oh no, just you finish up with the user one, because I've downloaded it a couple of months ago, and I've been playing around with it here and there. When I got it, I don't really make cocktails anymore, so it's not something that's in the front of my brain anymore. Like I don't bartend as much as I used to. So like if you have something that does P&Ls for me and like invoice management, then we can chat about that. But like, it was just not something I did. But like, I started looking into it, and I can see that quick absorption of information that is sort of being relayed there in the color scheme. I'm colorblind, but I can see a difference in all those colors.
Colorblind compatibility is something that I've actually thought about a lot, and it sort of planned for the future, but it's not it's not exactly like the top tier priority. But it's good.
Fair.
It's good to know that, because it has been a discussion between me and like the hardcore group of like Imbiblians who I talk to about this app. So and with regards to the P&L thing. We'll definitely have to talk about that a little later, because you're anticipating a lot of things that are on the developer to-do list. But back to this sort of interface. Let's say you forget what creme de violette looks like. Obviously this isn't the only creme de violette,
You're
but it gives
swanky
you
there. You got a
yeah,
swanky creme de violette.
little swanky. Same with maraschino.
Yeah.
So you can like very quickly see these things. Of course, with lemon juice, there is not, there's no bottle, obviously, but you can see the flavor map for lemon juice. So all ingredients have a flavor map like this, which delineates the taste on 12 dimensions. We got sweet, sour, herbal, bitter, vegetable, umami, savory, viscosity, spicy, smoky, ABV, and fat. Obviously, the sour is maxed here. But what this sort of thing allows Imbiblia to do is crunch all of the flavor data from, in this case, 4 different ingredients, use the ratios to crunch all that data, and then come up with a flavor map for the cocktail itself.
Does it do that automatically?
It does that automatically. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And what this allowed, I didn't realize how powerful this feature was until I built it and started using it. So for example, the next thing I'm going to show you is, think about on Spotify, Spotify will recommend you a song that somehow is like another song, even though it potentially is by a different band and maybe from a completely different genre.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's still like, oh yeah, this like fits together in a playlist if you smash these two together, right? So I basically did that for cocktails, and by doing it through flavor. So down here, you can see recipes recommended by flavor. What it does is it takes this 12-dimensional object, which is the flavor profile of an aviation. Yeah. And then it places that in 12 dimensions. This is going to sound a little nerdy, but it places it in 12-dimensional space along with every other recipe in Imbiblia. And then what it does is it tries to find, it does find what the shortest distance between that object, in this case, the aviation, and what's the closest distance to the next thing in terms of this 12-dimensional flavor, it basically latent space embedding map. And so the next one here, and this is only what's in Imbiblia. So as the whole library grows, this capability gets even more precise and more powerful as you add things. So the closest thing here is a bramble. And then after that, it's a white lady. And it gives you how close it is, like 98.65.
Oh, wow.
98. So yeah.
So it's basically if someone was off the cuff and you make them a classic, you've basically got the next 3 orders ready to rock and roll straight after that off the cuff.
Exactly. So it fits it fits that glass slipper of situation where someone's like, I love this. Can you make me something like same but different? Yeah. Same but different, And it's like, oh, well, just get the same thing. You obviously can't say that. So like, how do you split that hair? Like obviously if you're a really experienced bartender, you can just kind of crunch the algo in your own head and be like, all right, well, what's similar? Aviation, bee's knees, kind of similar. All right, I'll give them that kind of thing. And actually that's an example where I kind of started to realize the power of this. So if we go to bee's knees, and we go to recommended by flavor, the IBA version of the aviation is here. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I never realized how similar the aviation and the bee's knees are. They're both predominantly gin. They have
Yeah.
a wicked sour bit, but then they have a sweetness that isn't standard.
Hmm.
They have like a weird sweetness to them because honey is kind of like it's almost like an umami sweetness. There's a lot going on in honey that you don't get in simple syrup. And the same thing, you can say the exact same thing for a little mashup of maraschino and creme de violette. It's like,
Yeah.
that's not just sweet. That's just not straight sugar. Like there's a lot of flavor
Yeah.
inside of here. And so when I realized that, that's when the power of this sort of recommendation algo really hit me. I was like, holy shit. Like I never realized this even after 10 years of bartending.
That's next level cool. And the bramble is an underrated cocktail. If anybody doesn't know what a bramble is, you're missing out. It's an underrated classic.
100%. Download Imbiblia so that you can get your Bramble today. But another cool thing that these flavor maps allow is that you can search by flavor.
Oh, okay.
So let's say, I'm gonna, zero fat. Let's say I want something super smoky, little bitter, sweet, less on the sour. I'm kind of just gonna let those fly for now, see what comes up. Yeah. Black Pearl. This is
You got the
Black Pearl is
drunk uncle's number 3.
Oh yeah, there you go. There you go. So what we can do is this is what we searched up in the corner. We can actually compare the flavor maps. So you can see they're fairly similar shapes, but this wasn't a perfect match. Let's see, it was an 82% match. But you can see there's quite a bit of similarity here. Like I was searching for something a little bit smokier. Yeah, and then we can see the recommended by flavor for your drunk uncle. If we go to the Black Pearl, for example, you can see there's a smoked cinnamon stick in here. It uses sombrero mezcal, so this thing is pretty smoky, and you can see it matches that initial search profile even closer.
That's
and
cool.
Look, you can see an 81% match between my buddy Caleb, who's now at Boulevard in Vancouver, 81% match with your cocktail, the Drunk Uncle.
That's crazy. That is so cool.
So yeah, that was a fun feature, which honestly I didn't really anticipate until I had built it, and I was like, whoa, there's a lot more here going on than I realized.
So that's for the general consumer. That's for the bartender and the cocktail nerd that's doing it. You've got a lot of business success stories as well, and the business app is on here on the left. The one that you were talking about has 426 recipes. You were telling me in the green room, the 426 recipes. Some of them are like 7 prep recipes deep per cocktail.
Yeah.
How does all that work in the back end?
So let's see. Let's find an example here. Okay, so this is, I don't think I have any that are multiple nested deep, at least not in the demo business account here. So here you can see the list of ingredients. I've just got 2 here. And then, the daiquiri here, if it's got this little pie chart symbol, the little ratio wheel, and it's highlighted with that gray, you can click on it, and then that ingredient card comes up. So, for example, with that restaurant you were mentioning, you would click on this and then there would be another custom ingredient, or there would be like 3 custom ingredients, and you could click on those and it would just keep going. And some of them were like Swiss cheese rabbit holes. It was kind of crazy, but it was amazing how well it all worked and how organized it is. Because if you're thinking about, specifically if you're thinking about like prep day, and you have to like prep a whole bunch of different amounts of different things, you can go to your ingredient list here and, bring up your batch calculator and be like, oh, I need, let's say I need, no. Yeah, let's say I need 3.5 liters of this. Oh man, I got a little, that's fun. Always fun to find a bug. No software is without bugs. So, So like, basically you can take your, you can open up everything that you need to make, set those amounts, and then just get, it automatically changes the
Hmm.
amounts, like 3 liters of gin here, um, 5 liters of tequila here. You can set all those and then just work through that through your entire prep session, instead of like dealing with your calculator and, having to write things out and whatnot.
And
So
on the business accounts, they set up everything themselves. They can add recipes and like do all that back end stuff. It doesn't have to have anything to do with you once they've signed up for the business account. They
um,
basically can just build everything.
a couple of things there. One, the first thing that needs to happen is I need to see a list of ingredients, um,
Mm.
in order to make sure that I have everything in there. So, for example, like, if I, you know, show a little God mode here, this is my account with God mode. It basically gives me a whole bunch of things. And this is where like I manage all of the ingredients, because having precision with all of these and how many do I have? 4,000 right now. Um, I need to make sure that these are all on point.
Mm.
So basically, a bar that wants to come on board, I will take a look at their ingredient list and make sure that I have everything for them. And then there is an extra charge. Like if you just want to send us your entire, canon of recipes for an extra charge, we will populate the account.
Mm.
So just to make it a little bit easier. But to answer your question, yes. So in the center here, you can go to the builder, and this is where you can build everything. 1 ounce of rum, add that, and then one thing that's nice here is it starts to populate that flavor map instantly. So you
Hmm.
can actually workshop a cocktail without ever pouring something. So, for example, if I add, a half ounce of, something, let's do something, let's do a juice of some sort. Let's add carrot juice and rum. It sounds weird. You can see that this changed
Mm.
quite a bit. So your sweet basically everything adjusted here.
That's really
Um,
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then you've got all your garnishes here. A lot of crazy things in there due to historical cocktails. All of your methods. And I'm adding new ones of those sort of like every day, not every day, but like whenever someone requests it, because I've made it very easy for people to request things.
Mm.
Specifically ingredients. Like if you go here and you don't, this looks a little funny just because it's on desktop. It's primarily designed just for, let's see if I'm gonna just write desk because I know there's nothing that has desk in an ingredient, and then that ingredient is not in Biblia. You just type it here, and when you press send, this goes directly to my phone, and then I whip out in Biblia, and with my sort of like God mode account, I add that ingredient within minutes. And like
That's
my
crazy.
my average ad time is like somewhere between 90 seconds and like 5 minutes. I mean, sometimes it takes me like if I'm in the middle of something a little crazy, but like there's been many times when I'm at the gym and I get like a few requests and I just like stop there and add ingredients between sets. But that's also something that's going to change because it's going to become I'm basically going to take myself out of the loop. I basically just babysat that whole process just to make sure that every detail is like kind of perfect, and I review it before basically making it active. But I'm going to start transitioning to making it even faster and smoother for the user and for myself, to be honest. Um,
Well, that's really cool. So I'm gonna just drop out the mirroring screen there. Back to watching two screens and the pop up screen was a lot. Um, so how are you with the feedback you were mentioning? Like you get requests for things. When it comes to feedback and adding new features as it grows, how is the app growing for you since day like 1.0? Are you working on 3.0 right now? Is 2.0 doing really well? So you sort of just like letting dogs lie sort of deal, or is 3.0 in the works?
um, basically 2.0 is just going to keep evolving. The jump between like 1.0 and 2.0 is like huge, and that was mostly due to like I was still learning as a coder in terms of how to pull it off. um, and so like yeah, I wanted to launch something because my initial vision was this complete platform that we've looked into a little bit. And my sort of sensei of coding was like, nah dude, just like launch something simpler, like your MVP, get that out there. If you get good buzz and it
Yeah.
people, it actually works, then build your huge dream. And 1.0 did great. It hit number one on the App Store on day one. It got
Wow.
featured by Bon Appetit magazine, which was pretty amazing. And it's sold, that first 1.0 version, it wasn't free. It was like a couple of bucks, and it sold every day for years until I got 2.0 up and running. So it felt like a good validation, and it felt like I got enough like human feedback that was like, the ratings on both Google Play and the App Store are pretty phenomenal. And the tiny little gripes that like a couple of those reviewers have, 2.0 just completely tiles over all that stuff and solves every one of their tiny little quips. Because when I first read those, I was like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, don't worry. um, so yeah, 2.0 will just keep evolving based on business needs. Like, you mentioned that P&L thing. That's something that I've thought deeply about, and have made a lot of progress on. Like, for example, imagine if you could open up Imbiblia and it gives you a cost of your cocktail.
Mm.
And then, one thing that we didn't look at is that with the business account, you can create customizable lists, and you can have analytics applied to those lists, so that, for example, you get a flavor wheel that crushes the entire cocktail set in that list. And so then you can very quickly see holes in your menu. So like, let's say
Oh.
you're launching a spring menu, and you just go to that, you tell your bartenders like, add what you want to this list that you want to be on the next menu. Do that, add them to your staff account in Imbiblia, add that to the list, and then I'm going to review it next week to see what else we need. And then a week goes later, your staff's added a whole bunch, and then you just go to the list, and instead of looking through all of the cocktails individually and trying to see where there's you're not catering to some part of the market, you just go to analytics, look at the comprehensive. It's got comprehensive and aggregate views, which do slightly different things. But the comprehensive one, you look at it and you instantly see that, like, there's not a lot of color in, like a well-balanced menu should have like pretty high marks for all of them. But like, let's say you look at it and you're like, oh, we have like our score for smoke is 0.
Yeah.
And it's like the Scotch and Mezcal crowd is not going to be happy with this menu.
Yeah.
So instead of like spending all the time to figure that out, just at a glance, you can figure that out, and then be like, hey team, I need something smoky. Like, get something smoky on this menu for me to like look at. And then someone adds something, and like, boom. Now that flavor wheel just looks like perfect. And you can be confident that you're not missing a part of your market with regards to flavor.
So with do you actually get the data of like who's looking at what cocktails? Like, do you have Difford's Guide does their 100 most searched cocktails on their website every year? Do you have that same sort of aggregate data from the app of like who's looking at what cocktails?
I did build that functionality. I haven't looked at it in a long time, to be honest.
I'm just saying that's social media fodder right there for you.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great idea. I can implement something like that to make it way easier for me to see, like, pronto, because all of that stuff's already built. I forgot that it was there.
I'm just giving you notes to give you more work after this.
Yeah, no, I love it. The more the better.
Let's talk about business and community. How are you growing the Imbiblia community? Is it just about the downloads, or is education and the culture component in your vision as well? Because I know sometimes as entrepreneurs, we get very like blinkers on, like I need to do this and make sure that it runs this way, and like as you're saying, there's always bugs in software. How do you sort of balance out that, okay, well, I want to build, as would you call it, ambiblians?
That is not my term. Someone called themselves an ambiblian, and I was like, "What?" It's like, okay. Um,
Is it about
so
the education, the culture, as well as like the downloads of it all?
I mean, absolutely. I think of Imbiblia as sort of the ultimate cocktail book. So in terms of education and information, I'm very proud of like how comprehensive it is. Like for just an example, like all of the historical cocktails in Imbiblia, um, and this could potentially be a very big rabbit hole. I'll try to keep it brief. All of the historical cocktails I personally researched, and I had about 75 or more cocktail books, and I basically looked up that cocktail and
Mm,
tracked it through history
yeah.
in order to make the best decision about what the best representation
Hmm.
of that was. And in many cases, I have multiple of the same cocktail with different years, because that's an important part of understanding that particular cocktail. Like, for example, I think it's um, I just have like a really good example. I don't think we need to share screen, but yeah, the Manhattan. I have
Mm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and some of those are variations like Perfect Dry Black. But
Yeah.
like I think it's an incredible piece of history that in 1884, in Byron's book, I think it was Byron, you had two Manhattan recipes. You had Manhattan number one and Manhattan number two, and one of them is incredibly fucking weird. But I felt like that was really important to like have side by side with your normal, your modern Manhattan,
Hmm.
because if you open all of these in Biblia and just scroll back and forth looking at them visually, you can see how this one cocktail has morphed over 100 plus years from something that was very bizarre to what we have today. But you can see the thread through all of these decades and centuries in order to see how it started. So the education part was incredibly important to me. And so like the other component of this sort of like historical research was, if you open up um, like the Flowing Bowl, you'll
Mm.
find a bunch of recipes that for a modern bartender, for the modern bartender's eye, are kind of weird and
So bad.
very difficult to understand,
Yeah.
because you'll see like a dash of rum and you're like, what the fuck you mean a dash of rum? Like out of a Japanese dasher top? Like that's not going to make much of a difference to your cocktail. And so I went on this. I didn't expect this, like, going back to like things taking way longer than you think they will. I ended up writing a 50-page research essay on what the dash meant in the pre-modern bartending era. And the way that I came up with, like, my sort of final answer, was I took the Knickerbocker, which is one of the oldest cocktails, and I basically tracked it through time and triangulated it in terms of like its flavor profile couldn't have changed that much because the ingredients are stable.
Hmm.
And so the ratios have to remain stable, at least to some degree. And in that way, I was able to find old versions of the Knickerbocker that call for a dash of something that you wouldn't normally think you would dash, and then be able to figure out what a dash probably was in that time. And it was variable because they were basically taking, a bottle with a modern, speed pour and dashing from that. And I also did like hundreds of manual experiments with that, with like different viscosities, in order to see like what the average amount that you would get by dashing out was. I mean, it was just a very productive but like crazy rabbit hole. And like that essay is inside in Biblia. If you like click on the units in the upper right, there's like an extra set of like tools. There's the tools legend, and then there's the essay. Like the tools, there's a conversion calculator, a bricks calculator, a temperature conversion table. There's an infusion timer coming. So yeah, yeah. And
That's very cool.
circle back to your question, education is really the heart and the guts of Imbiblia. And like I remember I was like just waking up one day, and I got a text from a number that I'd never seen, and it was just this long text from this bartender in Chicago, and he was like, "Man, I found Imbiblia like a few months ago, and it has saved my ass so many times. And I saw that you're crazy enough to put your phone number on the Imbiblia website. So I figured I'd just text you because I wanted you to know just how grateful I am for you having built this thing." And I was like, like, way to make my day. Like, this is like the best wake up call ever. So there's
Cool.
there's been a number of reactions just like that from people I've never met. And it's like, it's an aspect of entrepreneurship and building an app that I just never anticipated. And yeah, I think that speaks to your question of community. Hoping to do a Imbiblia funded cocktail competition later in August in New England.
That's cool.
It's still a little tentative, but all of the parties involved are like very gung ho. There's like a nice hardcore little group of Imbiblians in the Boston North Shore area.
That's really cool.
It's a lot of fun.
Do you see yourself as a tech entrepreneur now? Do you see yourself as like someone who is now running the business and like building a business around this app?
I got a lot going on. I got a lot of irons in the fire, and that's because like I'm a pretty like, for example, you were asking earlier about like UI and making it good for like a newbie versus a nerdy bartender, and like how did I get from like bartending in the weeds to like designing a visual format. Like, I've also worked as an art teacher. I worked on a tall ship at one point. I'm working in media now, which is something I never sort of expected. Coder. So it's kind of like a restless curiosity that's gotten me into a lot of trouble. But in this case, it's also brought me a lot of projects that I'm like, I'm responsible for, and I love being responsible for. So in terms of your question, I don't, in terms of like being an entrepreneur, my sort of take on that is that artists could learn a lot from entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs have a lot they could learn from artists. And I think trying to smear oneself across a bunch of great categories is sort of the a good way to go about life. So I kind of I see myself as like straddling a few fences in terms of like how do I like categorize myself. But in terms of being a tech entrepreneur, that's definitely one of them. I really enjoy like the business aspects a lot more than I thought I would. I always thought that would be like boring and like MBA, tedious, eye roll. But it's actually a lot of fun to like go on business, be on business meetings and like pitch. It's actually a lot more fun than I thought it would be. But yeah, here I find myself just exploring new art forms.
So what's the plan for the next 6 months? We're in June now. Like, what's the plan for the end of the year?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, I haven't pushed really any marketing for Imbiblia. I've been pretty quiet on socials for basically since the initial sort of hubbub around the launch of 2.0 sort of like died down. And I wanted to do that on purpose so that I could focus on the business accounts and make sure that they were basically perfect for the needs of the businesses that are currently on Imbiblia. And now that's like, for example, fitting all 426 cocktails into Imbiblia with like crazy nested complexities, and it all just like kind of works seamlessly, was like a huge validation. Because the counter would have been like, oh, let's say like 25 businesses sign up immediately, and then I instantly have like way too much work to do, and then I have 25 really disappointed customers
Yeah.
instead of like I wanted to have a couple of business customers, and then really make sure that it works perfectly for them. And now that I've kind of done that over the last 6 months to a year, now it's like, all right, Imbiblia's got some legs here. It's time to stretch them a little bit. I'm gonna start looking into a few areas in terms of like how to market, how to spread word a little bit more, be a little bit more active on socials. The cocktail competition that I mentioned is in the works. So yeah, now it's kind of like, all right, let's put a little gasoline in the fuel tank and see where we can go, kind of thing.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Hey, so we're at the stage of the podcast where I always ask my guests 5 deep podcast questions. They are deep. I've had a lot of people get stumped on these, but let's get into it. What is one lesson or experience that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life? Do not mention the sticky binder. The sticky binder is off limits for this question.
No, an answer popped right to my mind, which is that in enough cases, I've learned that my first impressions of people were so fucking wrong. It was crazy. It's not always the case, but like there've been enough instances where, like, I remember my first restaurant. Someone came onto the team like a few weeks after we opened, and I was like, I do not like this fucker one bit. Like, I just got like the bad heebie-jeebies. Like, I didn't like the way he talked to me. It was like, oh, this is not gonna go well. And a year later, I remembered thinking that, and I was like, wow, I have learned so much from this person, and I am so grateful to work with them. And just seeing that discontinuity, that inconsistency in my perspective was just like, all right, next time I get like meet someone and I don't get the best vibe, I'm going to put that conclusion on hold because I might be wrong. Really integrating that sort of reflex has been hugely valuable because it's allowed me to explore opportunities that perhaps I probably wouldn't have been able to explore because I was, so adamant in my initial negative conclusion. Hopefully
That's a good
fits the
answer.
bill there.
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of advice for the world, what would it be and why?
Be careful of the context. I think a lot of the disagreements between people have to do with the fact that they're talking with different contexts, different shaped contexts that include different pieces of information, different experiences. I think it's really important to realize that, like, if you were that person and you had had all of the experiences that they had, you would be saying exactly what they're saying. So, like, what's going on here? And I really think it boils down to the fact that people often are maybe don't focus as much as maybe it would benefit them to think about, like, all right, what context is this person coming from when they say this to me? And like, take my own context into consideration when I'm, receiving whatever they're saying. If it's a fancy way of saying, like, try to put yourself in someone else's shoes, before you snap at whatever opinion they have. So yeah, careful of the context. I think that's a good one.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you understood earlier in life?
That money is not evil.
I haven't had that one before.
I mean, if I'm going to be totally honest, like, I was I have like sort of a different life as like a writer and an artist of some kind. And, when I was younger, I kind of had this like, harebrained idea that like authenticity in an artistic sense somehow eschewed money as some kind of like dirty, grubby thing. And then like that is, money is for the Gordon Geckos of the world who are like just straight up evil people. And once I started exploring entrepreneurship, like obviously you can't explore entrepreneurship with that idea. Like there's a big inconsistency there, and that contradiction sort of like comes to head. And then I started to think about like money more as like a type of information.
Hmm.
I mean, if I'm going to get really into it, I think money is uh, fungible trust. It allows us to have trust in strangers, because the money that they have that they're paying us is proof that someone else trusted them. The money that we pay, someone to do something for us, it's proof that someone else trusted in us enough to do something to get that money, and we're transferring a little bit of that trust to someone else. So I think just reframing, in my mind, what money really is and how it functions, and how it actually does us a huge benefit of helping hold society together despite an enormous number of strangers being together. Because if you go back, to prehistoric times when we didn't have money, when you put two strangers together, you did not get what we have when two strangers walk by each other on the sidewalk today. You got blood and murder usually. So when I sort of like came to the realization that maybe there was a different, better, more useful perspective on money, I was like, oh, okay, I wish I'd thought about this when I was much younger. So there you go.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
Ooh, I don't know if it's changed over time because I'm not sure I thought about it too much. Um, how I define it now is how well you can engineer the aspects of your work in your circumstance so that they are an optimal challenge, which gives you the most agency and ability to move forward. Because there's a really strong link between lack of agency and things like depression,
Hmm.
anxiety. When you don't feel like you have control over something, the human psyche doesn't do very well. Whereas if you do feel like you have agency, you feel much better and you can perform much better. And the optimal challenge is like not too hard to the point where like you get so frustrated you're paralyzed, and not so easy that you get bored and give up as a result of just not being interested. The optimal challenge is the sweet spot where it's like it's just hard enough to keep you interested, and that allows you to make progress. So I think success is really an ability to be like, how do I take what I need to do and break it into small enough chunks so that it fits my current abilities, and it can be an optimal challenge. And then I can actually have fun doing it, figuring it out. And then when I succeed at it, I can move on to the next one. So I don't really see success as like some kind of destination or like a benchmark or a milestone that you achieve. I think success is really, um, the the process that you bring to every day of your life. So.
Wow. Last one. What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Ooh, well, to be honest, I'm a big believer in the fact that we might figure out a few things with regards to anti-aging and some other sci-fi things. So I'm hoping that my legacy never comes about because I'm still here. But all right, if I had to like um, answer that in a bit more of a traditional way, I'll admit I haven't really thought about that. Um, I've done a lot of writing, and I would like to think that the things that I've written will be part of that legacy, and that people will be happy I spent the time stringing those words together. And then the same goes for the products. Like I hope that people are grateful for all of the code that I strung together for building things like in Imbiblia and a bunch of my other products. Um, a lot of entrepreneurship really comes down to like trying to make other people's lives easier. If you can make someone's life a lot easier, they'll probably give you money. Is kind of like the nice way to put it. So in terms of like the market is a really good signal in terms of like whether you are achieving that, whether you're being helpful. Um, So yeah, I hope my legacy will be one that like, yeah, that dude was pretty helpful. I'm glad that he came around and spent some time here.
That was awesome. So, very last question before we go. What's your favorite classic cocktail?
Oh, son of a.
Well, I thought about it. It's just as I said it, I was like, oh shit, he just like hundreds and hundreds of cocktails coded into an app.
Yeah.
It's like it's going to be a tough one to answer.
I mean, I mean, a really good bourbon sour,
Nice.
like, but yeah, a really good, really well made bourbon sour. Just he's gonna hit 99.99% of the targets I need hit. Yeah, I think I'll just go with that one.
Perfect.
It's fucking delicious.
Well, man, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. When I brought back the show for the second time after my little hiatus, I had like a list of people that I wanted to like tag along, and so I've like literally right behind my computer right here on a whiteboard is like everybody I want to have on the show, and some have got ticks and some have been wiped out because I've had them on the show. But yeah, you have been on the list for a long time, and I'm glad that I got a chance to sit down and have a chat with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. I
This is
love
a lot
what
of
you're
fun.
doing, and I'll chat to you really soon.
Cheers.
Thanks, man. Bye.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.